Hello folks, welcome back to the Edupedia world and I am Abhinay Gupta. So today again we'll continue with the topic, the Competition Act 2002. So this is just the second lecture of the topic of the chapter, and in the previous lecture we have dealt with the introduction part of the act. We have seen the background behind the Competition Act, right? We have seen that before the year 2002, we had the MRTP Act into play, right? Back since 1969. We have seen the role of the MRTP Commission, we have seen the working, we have seen the objectives and the scheme of how they actually try and achieve their objectives. So what are the basic objectives that we have seen over there? The first is the prevention of the concentration of economic power in any one of the player. Then prohibition of monopolistic trade practice, prohibition of restrictive trade practice, and prohibition of unfair trade practice. So these were basically the four objectives, right? And we've also understood that the Competition Act does not aim on removing the competition from the market, because a healthy competition is very important to improve the economic performance of the marketplace. But what does the Competition Act aim at is to eradicate the unfair trade practices in the market. It aims at reducing or minimizing the adverse effect of the unfair trade practices and to promote the fair trade practice, to promote fair competition in the market, right? So we'll go ahead with the provisions of the chapter to understand of how it actually performs and how it puts a curb on the unfair trade practices, right? So before that, in the lecture today, what we'll be covering is the definition, right? Because definitions are basically what are being asked in your examinations directly, right? So before this, we have already covered a chapter, that is the SARFAESI Act, Securitization and Reconstruction of Financial Asset and Enforcement of Security Interest Act, right? So while we were discussing that chapter, I told you that that is one chapter from where you are being asked definitions directly, and this is the second chapter from where definitions are being asked in your examination, right? And since you get a 4-mark question, basically that is the general trend, that you get a 4-mark questions from this chapter in your examination, right? So even one complete definition would be enough, would suffice for your 4-mark question. So if you get a 4-mark question, then and you are asked to explain any of the terminology used in the chapter, then you will have to use the words, the phrases given in the text, given in the act, right? So in order to help you to understand and learn the definition, right, I would give you a brief understanding about what the definition means to say, right? We would discuss the meaning of those terminologies, and then learning the definition would be very easy for you, right? So basically there are around 15 to 18 definitions that the act, that the syllabus has for us, but out of them there will be 5 to 6 definitions that are the most important definitions, right, and have been asked repeatedly in your previous examinations, and your RTP and the practice manual also contains the reference to those definitions itself, right? But apart from that, there will be 5-6 other definitions that we'll be covering, because I want you to understand those terminologies. And apart from that, there are 7-8 other definitions remaining that I will not be discussing in the class, because those are the very terms that you are using in your day-to-day life. While you're studying about law, while you're studying about financial management, accountancy, you use those terminologies, right? And those are not very important as well. And there's nothing to explain over there. If there is something, then you need to mug up. If you have time, if you want, you can go ahead and mug up those 7-8 left out definitions as well. But the major that is important for exams will be covered, right? So basically following is the list of all the definitions that we will be covering in the class. So it's 10 definitions that we will be covering in the class, right? Acquisition, agreement, cartel, consumer, enterprise, goods, person, relevant market, relevant geographical market, and relevant product market, right? Out of these, the definitions that have been highlighted, the agreement, cartel, consumer, enterprise, and goods are the 5 definitions that have been asked in your examinations repeatedly. right? So if you do something from this chapter or you don't, these 5 definitions have to be on your fingertips, because you never know, again there is one of these 5 definitions coming in your May 16 paper or again November 16 paper for whatever you're preparing, right? So, and I'll also discuss the kinds of questions that the examiner has asked you. That is the basic procedure of how we do our classes, right? So those of you who are new to this chapter, who are new to my class, please try and understand. What we do is we first go with the provisions, we go with the entire understanding, and then we cover the questions that have been asked in your previous examinations. The kinds of questions the institute asks, and what are the basic points, what are the basic references that you need to remember, right? And we have also discussed the important sections that are important, the basic concept behind those sections, and the crux that you need to memorize and that you need to jot down in your examinations in order to secure marks, right? So we'll start with the definition today. The first definition that we'll be taking up is the acquisition. So most of you must be familiar with the term acquisition. We are using it in our day-to-day life, but when we are talking about the definition of acquisition, we are talking about the definition of acquisition in context to the Competition Act 2002. Right? So over here, the acquisition that we are talking about is basically the acquisition of shares or assets in the enterprise, in any enterprise. Right? So if you go by the definition, then acquisition means directly or indirectly acquiring or agreeing to acquire. That means even if you acquire the share of any enterprise directly, that is acquisition. And if you do not acquire directly, that means if you do not pay and purchase the shares, but indirectly you take over some other company and that company holds a lot of share of this company, even that will be considered as acquisition. Right? You take over company B and B has 50% shares of C. So you will be considered to hold the 50% shares of C now. So even that is indirect acquisition. So by the definition, acquisition would include the direct acquisition as well as the indirect acquisition. Right? So acquisition does not only mean that you have acquired. It is not a past tense. It is either the present tense, you are acquiring, or a future tense, you are agreeing to acquire. Right? So keep that in mind while you are writing the definitions. These are the important tips that you need to analyze in your definition so that you do not make a mistake in the examination. Because your language is very important in law. Specifically while you are writing an answer for the definition or you are quoting a specific clause. Right? So acquisition means directly or indirectly acquiring or agreeing to acquire. That is continuing or future. Right? Now what? Now there are 4 things that you are acquiring. First is either the shares or the voting right. Right? Or you are acquiring or agreeing to acquire the assets of any enterprise. Because if you are acquiring the assets and you are acquiring the control over the enterprise, even that is an acquisition of the enterprise. Right? So that is one thing. Those are 2 things. One is the share and voting power or the asset of the enterprise, or you are acquiring the control over management or control over asset of the enterprise. So when we are talking about direct acquisition of the shares or voting right or asset of enterprise, that is where you purchase them. Right? You go to the market, you purchase them. You go to the company, you go to the enterprise, you purchase them. But when you're talking about acquiring the control over the management or acquiring the control over the asset is when you actually take over the entire enterprise. Right? Or you take over some other enterprise that controls the management. So by that you are acquiring the control over the management, or you're acquiring the control over the asset of that enterprise. Now that asset would be acting on your directions. You are controlling those assets. So that is acquisition. Right? So basically if we again go through it, acquisition means directly or indirectly acquiring or agreeing to acquire shares, voting rights or asset in an enterprise, or the control over management or control over the asset of an enterprise. Right? So that is what acquisition means. So this is how you need to break the definitions in order to understand and in order to analyze so that you do not make a mistake. Right? So next is agreement. Now what do you mean by agreement? So what does an agreement mean? So while we are talking about the Competition Act, you are basically talking about the agreement among the market player in the economy. right? Basically, so agreement would include any arrangement. If you are having any arrangement with any other enterprise, any other entity, right, any other market player, you have an arrangement, okay, this is how we'll proceed, this is what you do, this is what I'll do, and this is how we take the market, or this is how we commence, right? So it is any arrangement or any understanding that, okay, if we get into a hard or cutthroat competition, both of us will be damaging each other. So let us do one thing. Let us put this flooring. We will not go below this in pricing, or let us put this capping. We will not go above this. Right? So this will be our range where we will play fair in the market. That is something that you do. So an agreement is an arrangement or an understanding or an action in concert. That means if you have decided, okay, we are 4-5 people, let us get into this action into the market now. So we are deciding to commonly or together get into any action in the market, right? So if you are entering into any arrangement, or if you have any understanding among yourself, or you are to indulge in any action in concert, that is an agreement, right? And the requirement, this agreement may be formal or may be informal. You don't actually need to get your letterheads and then print it formally and get it signed by everybody. No, it is not required to be a very formal agreement. It can be an informal agreement. You don't need a stamp paper for that, right? It can be an agreement in writing, or it can be an agreement oral. In writing means, okay, you have a contract now, you have an agreement, all of you have signed, okay, we will do these, or we will abide by these provisions, we will abide by these decisions that we have taken. Or otherwise, there are 2-3 people, you're sitting together, right, and you think that, okay, we are the 3 people in the market now, let us do one thing, or one of them brings on a proposal, right, of a plan of action to take in the market that is beneficial for all of them, and all the other 2 agree, and they go back home, they go back to the company, and they start those things. Even that is an agreement. They have agreed to act like that, right? That is an oral agreement. They have agreed to perform certain action. So an agreement can be in writing, an agreement can be oral, right? An agreement can be enforceable by law and can not be enforceable by law as well. That means it is not compulsory that if somebody breaks an agreement, you can approach the law, you can approach the court. No. Enforcement by law is not a compulsion in the agreement as per the Competition Act. Because generally whenever you talk about an agreement is an agreement which is lawfully enacted, right? But over here in Competition Act, you have a wider term, right? You have actually the layman term of the word agreement. Arrangement, understanding, action in concert, formal, informal, writing, oral, enforceable or not, right? So if I read out the definition, it is: agreement includes any arrangement or understanding or action in concert, whether or not such arrangement, understanding or action is formal or in writing, or whether or not such arrangement, understanding or action is intended to be enforceable by legal proceedings. That is it, right? So now if you understand the type of questions you get in your examination, for that we'll discuss a question from May 2004, right? The question says, an understanding has been reached among the manufacturers of cement to control the price of cement, right? Understanding is a part of agreement, you remember? Yes. But the understanding is not in writing, and it is also not intended to be enforceable by legal proceeding. Examine whether the above understanding can be considered as an agreement within the meaning of section 2 subsection B of Competition Act 2012. So you already know the answer, right? We have discussed the definition of agreement. You know whether the question is right or wrong, right? Whether that will be considered as agreement or not. So obviously it will be considered to be an agreement, right? But how do you write your answer now? So the examiner does not want you to just write, okay, enforcement by law is not a compulsion, writing is not a compulsion, so it will be considered as a lawful agreement. But that is not the way of writing. You will first have to write down the entire definition of agreement, right? That, yeah, as per section 2 subsection B, agreement means any arrangement or any undertaking or any action in concert, right? Whether that arrangement, undertaking or action in concert is formal or in writing, or whether that agreement, whether the arrangement, undertaking, understanding or the action is enforceable by law, by legal proceeding or not, whatever, right? So you will write down the entire definition and then you will say that yeah, the question says about these 2 points, and as per the definition above, we know that these 2 points are not compulsory to for the agreement to be enforceable, right? So otherwise also it will be an agreement, so the contention of the question is correct, right? You will write down again in points that as per the definition above, such understanding is not in writing, and such understanding is not intended to be enforceable by legal proceedings as well, and it is a valid agreement, right? So that is how you get the questions in your examination, and this will be a 4-mark question. Next, we would understand the definition of cartel. So cartel is a term most of you must have already heard about while you are doing your economics or something in your school. Otherwise, for some of you, it may be a new word, right? So in a layman term, cartel is basically an association of people coming together, forming a union for a certain action, right? That is a layman definition of cartel, right? And if you go through the definition given to you, so first I'll read out the definition and then I'll explain it to you. So the cartel includes an association of producers, sellers, distributors, traders or service providers who by agreement among themselves limit, control or attempt to control the production, distribution, sale of price or trade in goods or provision of service, right? So that is basically the definition as given in your Competition Act. So now if you understand it, then this definition basically talks about the 5 categories of the market players, right? Which are the producers, the sellers, the distributors, the traders and the service providers, right? So what they say is that these 5 market players, right? So producers may come along. So this cartel, when we're talking about, it is an association of either all the producers or either the sellers or the distributors or the traders or the service providers. It is not an association amongst each other. It is not an association between the producer and the seller. No, it is an association between 2 or more producers, right? For what? To either limit, control or attempt to control the production. It is not necessary that they will be able to control, right? But still they have formed an association. It's an association of producers and they want to control the production. What will happen when they control the production? The demand is constant in the market, supply was constant, right? They had a ratio. Now when they control the production, the supply goes down, the demand is still there, the demand is constant, but if the supply goes down, the price increases. So that can be an objective. So an association of producers to limit or control the production, or association of sellers to limit or control the sale quantity or the sale price. An association of distributors to limit or control the distribution of goods. An association of traders to limit or control the trade in any particular good. They do not want that good to be traded into the market. They can limit the trade. That okay, this is the maximum trade we'll do this month, right? They want to keep the stock back. Or it is an association of service providers to limit or control the provision of service into the market. So if there is a lack of service provided into the market, for example, if you all are going to be auditors, so 5 of you are from a particular town or particular city and there are only 10 CAs over there. I'm taking a hypothetical example, right? So the 10 CA, they form a cartel. They form an association. Okay, we would limit the services, right? So what will happen is that people in the market, they want services and the CAs have limited their services. They are not providing more than certain number of audits or more than certain number of accountancy or more than certain number of scrutinies or anything, right? So what will the people do? Since they want their accounts to be audited, they will be ready to pay more than the market price. So if they, for example, they charge rupees 20,000 per audit in the small town, then they would start charging 30 or 40,000 and the big market players will give it to them, right? But that does not mean that they will not audit the other firms. They have got the prices, they have got the price inflated, and then they will again release it slowly and silently and get into the market. And what happened actually at the end is that the value for the chartered accountants in the market increased, which was inflated with an unfair practice. And due to that, the consumers of the service, the other players, the other entities in the market who want their services are suffering. So this is what will be prevented by the Competition Act. right? So basically we are deviating from the topic. The definition of cartel, is that what we were understanding? So I hope it is clear with you. It is an association of any of these five to limit, control, or attempt to control the activity that these five marketplaces do: producers, sellers, distributors, traders, or service providers, right? So we would take a reference to a CA final November 2009 question, right? The question where you had to use the definition of cartel. So the question says, the orange producers of Nagpur, right, they have formed an association to control the production of oranges. Examine whether it will be considered as a cartel within the meaning of section 2 clause C of the Competition Act 2002. So will it be considered to be a cartel? The answer is yes. So first you will write down the entire definition of cartel, and then you will say that in the given case the association that has been formed is that of the orange producers, and hence it clearly falls into the definition of cartel, right? It is an association of, you will write, it is an association of orange producers, first thing, that is to limit, control, or attempt to control the production of oranges into the market, right? That is how you answer, that is how you get the questions in the examination. Now the next definition that we take up is the definition of consumers. So the definition of consumer is actually a lengthy definition if you go by the text, but it is again a very simple definition if you understand it, right? So to give you the feel of the complication, I would read out the definition first. It will take more than 1 minute, but I will read it out. So the definition is, consumer means any person who buys any goods for a consideration which has been paid or promised, or partly paid and partly promised, or under any system of deferred payment, and includes any user of such goods other than the person who buys such goods for consideration, paid or promised, or partly paid or partly promised, or under the system of any deferred payment, when such use is made with the approval of such person, whether such purchase of good is for resale or for commercial purpose or for personal use. 1. You have the second part remaining. The second part is, hires or avails any service for a consideration which has been paid or promised, or partly paid and partly promised, or under any system of deferred payment, and includes any beneficiary of such service other than the person who hires or avails of the service for consideration, paid or promised, or partly paid or partly promised, or under any system of deferred payment, when such service are availed of with the approval of the first mentioned person, whether such hiring or availing of service is for any commercial purpose or for personal use. Whew. So if you go and read the definition in a plain context, you would go crazy. Right? That is what I used to go when I read it for the first time. Right? But again, if you sit down in patience and analyze this definition, it is a very simple and clear, crisp definition. It is just the repetition of some words that is making it a little complicated. Otherwise, there is nothing in this definition. The content of the definition is very less, right? So if you understand, right, then this definition of consumer basically talks about the person. Consumer is that person, right? It says, right, it is a person, any person who. So it is one person who buys goods for a consideration. That is the first point you need to understand. The consumer are those people who are buying goods for consideration. People who are getting goods for free are not consumers, right? So that means if there is a sample being distributed in the market and you get those samples, you are not a consumer, right? So if there is any problem, you cannot enforce the provisions of the Competition Act on them, because you are not actually a consumer. You haven't paid any consideration, right? So to be a consumer, you have to buy something first, and second, you will have to pay a consideration for that. And buying something is not the most essential thing. It's not just about the products, it is about services as well. So if you hire or avail any service for a consideration, even then you are a consumer. So you can be a consumer of goods, you can be a consumer of services, right? Now if you move ahead, we'll understand that now we'll start talking about the consideration part, right? So in the layman term, we know that buys good for a consideration, that means we are paying some consideration. that has to be written, right? So that consideration has been paid or has been promised to be paid. When you go to a shop, right, and you buy something, and what you do is you pay cash, right? Or if you go to buy something big, you pay by check, right? So that is payment. Either you paid over there, that has been, the consideration has been paid, we will say that the consideration has been paid, or else you have promised, okay, I will make the payment. You have entered an agreement, or you have signed a check or something that, okay, I will make the payment, right? So that is promised to be paid. Or maybe you do not pay everything 100% payment, or you do not promise for the 100% thing, but you do partly. So if it is a transaction of say 2 lakhs, then 1 lakh you pay via cash, so you say it has been paid, and for the other 1 lakh you enter an agreement that it will be paid within a month or something, or installment. The best example is installment, that is promised to be paid, right? So the consideration has been paid or promised, or partly paid or partly promised, right? Or there is another system that you can enter into. So partly paid, partly promised is not actually the best example. The EMI will not be the best example for that, because EMI will be the best example for the system of deferred payment, right? So if you are getting confused with it, we will restart it. So a consumer is a person, first point, right? A person who buys goods or avails services. This is the second point, right? And he buys goods or avails services for a particular consideration. That is the third point, consideration, right? Now the fourth point is about the payment of this consideration. Either it is paid, or it is promised to be paid, or it is partly paid and partly promised, or you have entered into a system of deferred payment. These are 3 modes of payment, how you can pay, right? And then why have you bought the good is another question, right? You have bought that good for either resale, or for commercial use, or for personal use. And in case of services, it is only for the commercial or personal use. You cannot resell the service, right? And now, is the buyer the only person who will be considered to be the consumer? So for example, if your dad goes and purchases a mobile for you, he comes and gives it to you and you start using it. Who is the consumer? Your dad all the time? No. In this case, even you are the consumer. So even the definition includes that if there is some other user who is using that good with the approval of the first mentioned person who has purchased it, who buys the good, even that person will be included in the definition of consumer, right? So basically, what are the parts? Person buys goods or avails services for consideration, which is being paid or promised, or partly paid, partly promised, or under deferred payment, right? And also includes that person who is using that good with the approval of the person who has purchased it, and using it for either resale or commercial purpose, for commercial use or personal use. That is it. So if you go by that definition, it is just a 2-line definition, but in actual you will have to write it in the way it is being given. So a consumer means a person who buys any goods for a consideration which has been paid or promised, or partly paid and partly promised, or under any system of deferred payment, and includes any user of such goods. So you're understanding now when I'm reading the definition again, right? So other such goods other than the person who buys such goods for consideration, right? And again over here you write the entire statement with consideration always. So when we are referring to the other person who buys the good for consideration, which is paid or promised, or partly paid or partly promised, or under deferred system of payment. So it is just a repetition. So whenever you use consideration, you will have to use paid, promised, partly paid, partly promised, or under deferred system. And this consideration word is used 4 times in the entire definition. So 4 times you will have to use the entire line, right? And then at the end it is whether such purchase of good is for resale, or for commercial purpose, or for personal use. And the same thing is for services. That is the simple definition of consumer. So don't be scared when you see such huge definitions. Just log on to my classes, check the chapter, check the lecture where I've covered it, go through it, and it will be clear with you, right? So we have taken a lot of time in explaining these definitions because these were actually important definitions. You get questions in the examination, right? So we will do the question that has been asked in your examination for the consumer definition, and then we will end this lecture. and the rest 6 definitions will be covered in the next lecture, right? So the question that you get in your examination for the consumer thing is that we would refer to the question that has been asked in 2006, CA Final May 2006, right? It says, examine with reference to the relevant provision of the Competition Act 2002 whether a person purchasing good not for personal use but for resale can be considered as a consumer. Now, since you have interpreted the definitions part by part, right, you have all the points on your fingertips, so you understand that even resale is included. But resale is included only in the case of goods. In case of services, you cannot resell the service, right? So resale in the case of goods over here, it is included. So what you will do is you will write down the entire definition. Yes, you will write down the definition. It is not difficult, but practice writing it once before you enter the examination. Otherwise, you will not be able to write in the examination, right? So you write down the definition and then you write, thus a person who purchases good for resale or for any commercial purpose and not for personal use is also a consumer, right? Because this actually the concept of commercial use or the resale, this was actually not covered under the definition of consumer as per the Consumer Protection Act. So if you refer to the definition of consumer in the Consumer Protection Act, over there they talk only about the personal use. So if you are a consumer and using it for the personal use, you will be covered under the Consumer Protection Act, otherwise not. So don't confuse it with that definition over there. So over here we have consumers who are using it for resale, for commercial purpose or for personal purpose, all of them, right? So we'll pick up the definitions of enterprise, goods, person, relevant market, relevant geographical market and relevant product market in the next lecture, right? So until then, this is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Stay tuned.